Welcome back, welcome back. A diplomatic row broke out between China and the United States on Thursday, following America's successful missile destruction of a defunct US spy satellite. Relations between the two superpowers were also strained last week when Hollywood film director Steven Spielberg pulled out as the artistic advisor to the Beijing Olympics, saying that the Chinese government was not doing enough to help end the genocide in Darfur. I'm happy to be joined now by Zhu Feng from the School of International Studies at Peking University to talk about China and its relations with the rest of the world. Welcome. It's very good to have you with us. Were you suspicious when you heard that this satellite had been shot down by the Americans and that they'd shot it down because they said it might contaminate the atmosphere? Do you think it was more than that?
Yeah, China's response is very negative. We consider it's a very negative event. I think the U.S. also do a lot to just defend its attack. But I think from a Chinese perspective, U.S. also should be just under fire because last January, Beijing also tested its satellite attack by just launching a missile, distracting the Chinese, outdated satellite. It also caused very strong and fierce, reactions from American side.
And why is China so keen to advance in space and so on? Do you see a new space race between China and the United States? It used to be between the United States and Russia, but now is there a new space race between the US and China?
No, sir, I don't think so, yes, of course, Americans' very ambitious plan to just reinforce its military capability in our space truly caused a growing suspicion and a concern from China's side. But we don't think we are ready to do as the former Soviet Union did against the United States, or some kind of arms race in our space will serve China's interests at the best.
Right, and in terms of the current situation, Steven Spielberg resigning as an artistic advisor because of Darfur, do you think that China is getting fair criticism about its role in Darfur, or do you think, as you may well, I suppose, that it's unfair?
Ironically, director Spielberg's pull out is truly very imbalanced, very embarrassing to China. So from the ordinary people's view, they will consider it some kind of intended, plot to just, we say, tend to the Beijing's international image, and also highlight some of the controversy which still, truly or realistically existing between China and the West.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor.
Thank you, sir. It's my pleasure.
Talks are continuing in Kenya to try to resolve the crisis which has engulfed the country since December's disputed election. President Kibaki's government and the opposition Orange Democratic Movement, led by Raila Odinga, who was with us a few weeks ago, are effectively in a standoff, and former UN Chief Kofi Annan is trying to negotiate a solution. Could a power-sharing deal lead to the homecoming of Kenya's celebrated corruption buster, John Githongo? 2 years ago, Mr. Githongo published a report accusing 4 senior ministers of complicity in a £400 million fraud, and he made it clear that corruption was rife throughout Kenya. He's in exile in the UK for his own safety and joins me now from our studio in Oxford. John, welcome. Tell me this, is there a link between corruption and rigged elections? Is there an umbilical cord, or are they quite separate?
Absolutely. Corruptly acquired resources finance rigged elections, number one, Sir David. That's the most direct kind of linkage you can find. But more importantly is that the conspicuous consumption that accompanies high-level corruption leads to resentments that affect the way people vote, and that political expression often finds an ethnic element to it. So it has a very, very direct correlation. A high level of corruption combined with conspicuous consumption on the part of a small elite leads to tremendous resentment in the population, and that it's easy to mobilize politically around that and lead to the kind of explosions of anger and violence that we have seen in Kenya before. So there's a very direct connection between the current crisis and the levels of corruption in Kenya. Anyone who says otherwise is deluding themselves.
Now, do you believe, in fact, John, that President Kibaki and Raila Odinga could realistically work together in a sort of coalition, a grand coalition, after what they've said about each other and done about each other? I mean, is that possible that those two men could work together?
I think it's possible for us to see a stopgap measure being crafted out of the talks that are being led very ably by Kofi Annan in Nairobi. Some sort of transitional government, some sort of grand coalition, as you call it, can be crafted that sees them all together in the same ship. Whether it will be a ship that is able to move in the right direction is another case altogether. And there'll be many questions and many questions about it, and many contradictions within it. So I would see it as simply the first step towards resolving Kenya's crisis. A grand coalition is by no means a silver bullet, and anyone who thinks it is will be gravely mistaken. It can fall apart extremely quickly, and the level of violence that would follow it would be more intense than what we saw after the election.
More intense, that's a terrifying thought. In those circumstances, if there is some form of power sharing going on, do you foresee yourself being able to go back to Kenya, or indeed be called back to Kenya?
I have the feeling that events in Kenya are going to move pretty quickly. In actual fact, I would like to think that they've actually moved pretty quickly since the middle of last year. I think things in Kenya are going to move extremely quickly. So I'm watching closely. I am busy in the United Kingdom right now, and watching and praying for my country. I'm most interested, Sir David, not in a job. I think that if I was only interested in a job, I'd have stayed working for President Kibaki. I'm much more interested in the fight against corruption and in the introduction of a new constitution in Kenya, in resolving some of the fundamental land issues, and most importantly, seeing how we can contribute to dealing with a very deep ethnic polarization that has now been caused by the crisis that has developed. Those are the fundamental issues, and one can solve them from a variety of vantage points.
And do you think, with all that's happened, as you say, in the ethnic situation, do you think the divisions that have been exacerbated by the 1,000 deaths and so on, do you think it's capable of being resolved by the people of Kenya, or do you think this racial hatred, unfortunately, is there to stay, or was always there, maybe?
I think that people in a highly heterogeneous community such as Kenya's, with several ethnic groups, there are always tensions, but Kenyans have always shown themselves to be a people who can live side by side peacefully and work together. And I think that the violence that we've seen has caused a serious fraying of the social fabric. I by no means think that this is not something that can be, I don't think it's irreparable. I think it's something that can be repaired. It requires leadership, committed leadership. It requires a definite belief on the part of leaders in the very concept of Kenya, and for leaders not to use this ethnic polarization as an excuse to mobilize politically for their own selfish ends.
You said you're not particularly looking for a job at the moment, but I mean, if Mr. Odinga were to offer you an important job, that would be difficult to say no to, wouldn't it?
I have learned, Sir David, that once bitten, twice shy. I am currently well occupied. I am watching the situation closely. I'm more interested in impact than in title.
Thank you very much indeed, John, for joining us. We really appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
And we'll talk again. There he is.
Thank you.
The corruption buster himself. That's all for this week. Do join me again next week, 7 days from now, for another Frost Over the World.